Hello, good morning. Hello. Hey Tony, how you doing?
I am doing very, very well. End of financial year coming up, school holidays. It is an absolute buffalo rush.
Oh my gosh. So, hello to everyone as you're coming in. We've opened the doors a little bit early. We're just catching up on our busy lives. So I'm in Queensland, and a lot of the private schools have 3 weeks holidays. So we've hit school holiday period. So it'd be interesting to see how that affects everybody's attention at the moment with all the phone calls from the kids coming through.
Angela, has the food bill gone up?
What was that? Sorry?
Has the food bill gone up now that they're at home and eating all the time?
Yeah. All of a sudden there's no food in the house. Is anybody else having these issues? Is it just us? Honestly, it's just crazy. You look at this and you go, they don't eat this much when they're at school, but I don't know. All right, so we're going to kick off on time, everybody, because we've got a short, sharp session and I want to make the most of Tony's time and you don't want to hear from me. But officially, welcome everybody. And hello again to our very special guest, Tony. It's great to have you here today. So to get started, I'd love for you all to say hello in the chat box, share what the weather is like where you are. We've had a very crisp start in Brisbane. It feels like winter has just hit, which is a bit weird. So, we'll come out of that. But we're going to kick off things with a quick poll. My colleague Emily is going to put up a poll for you so that you can let us know what's going on with your education program right now. And then we'll check back in to see how everyone's doing with that. And before we dive in, I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we're meeting on today and pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Angela Shelton, the CEO of Answers for Associations, an online platform for those working in the association space, like all of you here today. Now, let me reintroduce our special guest, Tony Maguire. Tony heads up the D12 team in ANZ. He brings a wealth of experience, and I mean a lot of experience, guys. He's worked with Fortune 500 companies like Apple and Oracle, and he is really, really passionate about transforming learning experiences with top associations in the healthcare, governance, finance sectors, and many, many more. All right, so I think we might end our poll and have a quick look at that, Tony, just to give you something to kick off your discussion today.
Well, I'm glad to see no one's lost.
We do have a very few very cold people in the room today, though. From the Blue Mountains. That looks chilling. All right. Well, there you go, Tony. I'm going to leave it to you to talk through this and kick off today's session.
Thanks, Angela. I might just share my deck, but I promise it shall not be death by PowerPoint. So there we go. Hi, everyone. As Angela said, been around a few rodeos, but I did begin life, those of you who do know me, I did begin life as a primary school teacher. So education and learning is a pretty core belief of mine. And I've been privileged over the last 3 to 4 years through forums that Andrew and others have put together, D12's own work, to see the way in which associations have started to rethink and re-engage around learning. And I've a little bit cheekily put in there, is your association's education game falling behind in ANZ? The way in which education as a part of member experience is always going to be a movable feast. The way in which membership changes, things like pandemics occur, then we come out of that and then we're back into a new normal. And here we are, 3, 4 years later, what does the future hold for us? So while it's a little bit tongue in cheek, what I thought I would do today is just put a little bit of a theoretical framework around how the associations that we speak to think about things. There might be something there that you strongly disagree with or you do agree with. Don't hesitate to drop something in the chat. I'll try and keep an eye on that. But also, I wanted to present 3 specific use cases that have certainly resonated with folks and associations that I've met with in fairly small events over the last 3 weeks. And they were quite useful to those leaders to get an understanding of how their association might think about things. So let's get into it. Always like to have a 7 signs of aging or a 4, 3, 2, 1 kind of slide, because it just helps direct our thinking a little. The association trends that we see coming up, the way in which associations think about those trends and how they make sense of them, how they direct their action, pretty straightforward. The 4 lenses through which they try and make sense of those changes is around the industry, obviously, that they're a part of, that vertical. And that speaks to the relevance of what they're doing. Innovation around the sustainability piece. And I made the joke last week with a couple of folks that you can't go to the opening of an envelope without someone wanting to know about AI. And AI is certainly on everyone's lips at the moment, as it should be. But there are some broader issues there that we won't touch on today, but we will be doing something subsequently, and I'll just mention at the back end for anyone who's interested. But AI is certainly a productivity and innovation piece, but it really affects, I think, in the first stages, how we think about the commoditized elements of our business. And quite often, that comes down to things like content. So how does AI speak to generation of content, those sorts of things? So commoditization, sustainability through innovation. But some of the examples that you'll see today think about how they actually leverage existing tools like automation better. So data and automation, as well as AI. Member growth and member success, the product suite that you're bringing to market. The questions that CEOs quite often think about in terms of where they direct effective and meaningful activities. What do we need to protect? Where do we diversify? And that could be services, could be revenue streams, it could be other value adds to the member experience. And then finally, if we're getting our heads around those first 2, how does that impact growth? The next point is fairly obvious, but it does need to be kept top of mind, I think, repeatedly. Where is value created? And there's 2 places for that. It's our people and it's our processes. Now, that came up very much in a conversation I had last week with a CEO, and they were talking about how they'd been through a renewal process within their own association. But what they found was that renewal process then brought into question the existing business processes they had, because the business owners and the people who had implemented systems had left the business. So people are absolutely important. Process, having consistency, integration, and a way to transmit knowledge over time is really, really important. And the last piece of that process is it's all about scale. How do we do these things in a way which scales without bringing up our effort levels? And the last piece is return on learning investment. And that's really one of the things that came out of one of the case studies, which I'll talk about, REINSW shortly. So look for that as we go forward. Won't bother too much about the agenda. You'll see it as it falls out, but values, mindset, there'll be some practice examples there, and then the use cases. So as we work with mission-based and clearly kind of defined association charters, first principles are always important. So for us, we find that we align really well with partners who are around learner agency, member agency, inclusivity in the broader sense, accessibility to services as broadly as possible, and the appetite for change and transformation. And I'll move shortly to a slide where we talk about that mindset change and some things to think about there. Apparently my screen has my desktop showing, maybe not the PowerPoint. Is that correct? Still, Beth? Can folks see my screen easily? Okay, let me just stop and start again. Hold on. Sorry about that all. I thought I was on a wicket there. There, how's that? Better? I think so. Perfect, okay. Apologies. The deck will be made available at the end anyway, so please don't feel you missed anything from my oversight there. Collaborative experience. I know we think about this in terms of member experience all the time, but co-design and co-creation, co all the time. So co-design of the experience in terms of going back and referencing your members, and the example that we'll talk about with ANZCA is particularly relevant here. And then the co-creation piece, co-creation of content, learning design, evidence for progress, co-creation in terms of communities of practice, support services. And then the last piece there is the platform partnership. I talked about automation before and personalisation, but thinking about things in terms of agile approaches, how quickly you can pivot. Do your internal processes and your people, are they able to help you pivot as a business effectively? Do you have the insights and the information at hand through visualizations, dashboards and so forth that can support continuous improvement? And then the last piece, and this has really been something which I think has jumped up in the last 6 months in particular, is around associations who are thinking about how they rethink their core application stack. Where can they find savings? Where can they better plumb data that's more effective? And keep an eye out for the ANZCA case study there, because that was a real key win for them. All right. So, transformative mindset. I won't dwell too much on this, but there are some things to think about in terms of messaging to boards, messaging with your management teams around how we have to think about moving from older conceptual frameworks to new ones, from disruption to innovation. And really the three things there are about access, how do you action, how do you pivot, and how do you analyse the impact? And I think they're the three takeaways there. So one CEO that I was chatting with recently, they were thinking about a learning project. Access was poor. They had the capability to act, but they couldn't analyse the impact. And that was the piece that allowed them to get the project over the line with the board, because the board really wanted to have a much more granular understanding of what was happening. So access, action, and analysing impact. The three practical questions here, which will lead us into our three case studies. I'm just checking my messages here. There's no chats that come in. Don't hesitate to drop something in the chat if you've got a question. Happy to take them in as we move through. So 3 practical questions that our use cases approached. The first was around member engagement. How do we improve analytics and how do we boost performance? And for that case study, that was a who question. Who are our members? Who's going to be looking at that performance improvement, and who needs to know about the analytics? Second question, this is the what. It's about creating personalised learning journeys. It's about personalising at scale. It's about member experience. And then the third question, the how, that's around the accessibility. That's about member success. How do they access the content? How do they move through the learning environments? How do they better access communities of practice, wellness activities? So without further ado, let's dive in. The first example that we're going to look at looked at 3 different kinds of question sets. They were interested in data, they were interested in analytics and performance and being able to reference that information back. And you'll see there on the screen some of the kinds of information they're able to bubble up really easily and really quickly for board, for leadership, for membership leaders and so forth. The first was understanding who the learner was and their attributes and their behaviours. And when you think about members, learners in real estate offices, for instance, these are time poor workers who are, executives who are working with the principal. Principal's got some very tight frames there in terms of what success looks like. So learning has to be simple, straightforward, accessible. But you have to understand what the needs of those learners are. What are their goals or aspirations? What do they think they need? And what do the principals think they need? The association itself, for this particular association, the way that they went about connecting with those needs at both the principal level and the learner level was really quite extraordinary. And they began building their content based on that feedback very, very quickly. The other question was around operation too. They started with a set of questions, which they found partway through their process after speaking with learners, principals, they found that they were actually not asking the right questions. So validating all the time, going back to those first principles we talked about. So the case study. So REINSW, fascinating association. They started working with us probably 12 months ago, a little over. The challenge that they had was that their previous learning infrastructure, was basically just a repository that housed courses. It didn't track progress. It didn't provide any granular feedback on how learners were progressing through content. When questions came in from principals, there was no way to provide those principals and all of those different real estate offices the information around how those agents were working through the content. It was very difficult to pull apart real estate from rental courses. It was a mishmash. Because of that mishmash, that was damaging to REINSW's reputation. They weren't able to build momentum with their membership, to grow their membership, to energise and activate key stakeholders who are going to actually help them drive their success. The approach they took was to go back to the market and assess other LMSs that could achieve probably 3 or 4 things that are important to them. First of all, how could they build content a lot faster? Their existing LMS didn't allow them to do that. So REINSW recognised that if they wanted to change the experience, they had to change the content. They had to change the offerings, make them more appetising. The second thing they needed was a way in which they could more effectively help learners self-serve, be self-directed, but also intervene when they needed to support those learners more effectively. And then the last piece was, okay, we've got all of that. What's the data now that we can provide back to board, leadership, but also there was an advocacy piece here. REINSW were interested in bubbling up information for advocacy at the government level. So the result was, after an implementation period of, well, 12 weeks from signing on the contract to getting the first course up and released, they were actually building their courses within the system in the first 3 to 4 weeks. So by the time they rolled around to that end period of the implementation, 12 weeks, they were good to go and they released their first courses. It was super accelerated. And that's not for everyone's appetite, of course. They had the motivation, they had the team, and they certainly had the expertise to do that. But more than that, they tied themselves to a very tight time frame to get that work done. So over that 12-week period, they moved from courses that were a hodgepodge to a new set of offerings that have since grown rapidly over the last 12 months. All the documentation, all their forms, all of the contractual information was all in the one place, and they now had video assignments and assessments that they could utilise as well, which was another way for the learners to better engage with the assessment pieces. And that was the key piece. Are there other ways that we can be assessed? The result, and this was massive within 12 months, 100% increase in learner activity. Learners went from being passive checking in, checking back out for long periods of time to be more fully engaged. That was down to the content, the design of the courses, but also the ease of use. The ease of use was so much of a quantum leap for the learners. And the last piece, of course, was when they got the feedback at the end of those courses, there was a doubling, 100% increase in the learner experience satisfaction rate. Great story. We have we've got actually REINSW is going across to North America next month to actually speak at a national conference on our behalf. It's our conference, but they're going to talk about their best case scenarios, and actually what they're doing is world class. So they'll be going across to actually share that expertise. If you have any interest in being connected with Aaron or any of the team, we'd be happy to make those introductions. But a great story. How are we going for time? Creating personalised learning journeys, and simply, does the learning journey, does the learner experience, does the member experience that you're putting in front of your members, does it do what it says on the can? Are they expecting something different? That alignment between their expectations and what's delivered is so critical. For associations, the biggest change, I think, is that there's no endpoint now for learning. We talk about lifelong learning. Whilst the concept's been around for a while, we have to really think about the fact that the way that people move through memberships and associations. When my auntie joined the Printers Union many, many years ago, she was in it for life. And happily they contributed a little bit to her funeral. But the way in which those values that she thought were important from a union, from that association, have changed rapidly. And the way in which people move between different life journeys and career paths will change as well. When we think about building a personalised learning journey, iteration is really important. The journey itself won't change, will continue to change and morph, but that also means that the way that you think about the learning, that you plan out, that you architect, the content that you bring in, that has to keep changing too. Content, evergreen content is really, really important. If you're still cycling out the same sorts of content that you were using 4 or 5 years ago, and you're not getting the feedback on that content so that you can test its efficacy, you're probably doing yourself and your members a bit of a disservice there. In terms of the brand alignment, when you come in through the portal or you come in through the member gateway, everything that happens past that point has to be aligned to that brand. So it shouldn't be a jarring experience to come into the wellness component. It shouldn't be a jarring experience that looks totally different when you come into the LMS or when you come into a mentoring program. So important that the systems that you bring together can support and enhance your brand and be responsive to those changing demands. 5, 6 years ago, not too many associations were overtly focused on how to support online communities from a mentoring perspective and from a peer support perspective. If anything, COVID taught us it was the demands and the pressures on people as they work both remotely, in office, and as their time across the day has expanded. So those support services are even more important. So important that those services, once rolled out, continue to be tested, continue to be iterated, but it's a seamless, clean interface. And that comes back to human-centered design and making sure that you're very intentional in the way that you think about the planning of your learning and your communities, your social spaces, and making sure that there's a unifying brand there. And that doesn't mean we've got the same font set across the entire suite. It's about the way that learners have provided input into how those services are provided, and they actually have bought into that membership experience. So, ANZCA, Australian College of Anaesthetists, just down St Kilda Road. they had a massive project about 2 years ago where they thought about all of the core systems. Now, this is a fairly typical scenario for associations that have been leveraging technology for some time. Over the previous 10, 12 years, they had onboarded a number of different systems to do a number of different things. Because of their maturity, the maturity of those systems, and the evolving nature of data, many of those systems didn't integrate easily. So systems couldn't talk to each other, they couldn't trigger actions or support automation more broadly across the business. And from an LMS perspective, and the LMS at that point was Brightspace. It wasn't offering the flexibility they needed to achieve ANZCA's goals. Why? We were ready for the data piece, but the other systems weren't. So what we did was we said, okay, if we were coming at this freshly from an ANZCA perspective, how would we approach this? So whilst the LMS was delivering the capabilities they needed for their learning, in the broader mix of their core systems, the integration needed wasn't there. So we thought about this from, okay, so if we started again today, how would we help them architect their system? So we spent a lot of time with our technical folk going in, working with their teams around what the learning systems would look like. We responded to their tender as if it was a fresh one, and we were very clear and explicit about how today we would think about data in a way that none of us could think about it 10, 12 years ago when they first started working with us back in 2014, I think. So that was a really important process and mindset for us. We went back very much to an innovation mindset. The solution that they thought about as they peeled off a whole heap of old systems, implemented one or two new systems, got rid of a few others that were legacy and didn't need to be there anymore. The way that they could start thinking about integrating systems, triggering automations, was really, really important. The cost savings alone were worth the price of the project. The result, however, once they had those core systems in place, and then they, in a sense, re-implemented Brightspace or renewed their experience with Brightspace, was huge. First of all of their previous highly centralised administration functions were decentralised. That meant their risk went down massively, and their abilities to support and sustain the platform and their other core systems were significantly better. They could do more with less people. They could successfully implement brand new fellowship courses that they couldn't do before because the data and the way that their management systems allowed them to better identify, target, and support those new programs. And they had the data on which to base strategic investments around what those new programs would be. And the last thing, which was really, really important, it goes back to agency again. They've done a lot of work in terms of re-evaluating the membership experience. Members wanted a learner-centric and self-directed experience. Until they had those core systems and those data integrations and automations in place, that last piece could not happen. So anyone who's got some similar issues, data systems not talking, different systems not talking, not being able to leverage automation, this is a really good example of one association who has turned that around. Colin is a great implementer of technology within associations, great little experience. Again, happy to connect with Colin if you have any questions or you'd like to dive into that a bit more. Accessibility. This is probably one of D2L's core principles. We think about our systems being able to speak to the broadest range of members possible. So that means, you know, what's the smallest device, the simplest device, the most modest device on which members might consume information. Let's make sure that as many services as possible can be delivered on that device. So we think a lot about the way in which our platform can serve as many individuals as possible, as many members as possible. So that was very much the case for members who are moving from face-to-face, blended and hybrid opportunities, and even with one association I was speaking to this morning, they have a lot of remote members who have pushed back really strongly on face-to-face. Not because they don't want the face-to-face regularly. They've made two decisions. First of all, the drop-in sessions have been scrapped because those members just don't have time. But the focus now around the annual conference has significantly increased. So there's now much more forward planning by members for that face-to-face conference in lieu of those others. So it's been a really good assessment and validation of what that particular association was thinking was the membership change. The mode of that accessibility is really important. As I said before, we build for any device size, but how do your members want to engage with you? Is it relevant to your current and to your future needs? Is it relevant and appetizing for your members and accessible? Is the learning experience properly balanced so that it provides equity as well as accessibility? So equity is really about learner agency, their ability to choose what works for them, time and place, mode of content consumption, a variety of activities that make sense for them, and the ability to choose and make self-directed choices. And then the accessibility piece is, do you have the capabilities, the platforms in place to actually deliver that? Let's jump into the last case study. And this case study is the Property Council of Australia. Our client had been with us for quite some time, but they were really going through a difficult time in terms of moving from face-to-face to hybrid, online, varied kinds of learning experiences. Again, they had a number of different platforms they didn't integrate, but the overall experience for the learners was very clunky, but it was also face-to-face weighted quite significantly. The solution for them was, as they onboarded a new LMS, they could actually think about how they could digitally transform their practice. So moving from almost solely face-to-face activities, professional development, CPD sessions, to offering a variety of self-paced activities that Property Council members could just choose from. They were also going through a parallel project as well in terms of bringing on a new CRM. I would be surprised if many of the members on the call today haven't been through a similar kind of process, bringing on a new membership management platform, a new CRM. That association speaking to this morning is going through a CRM project as well. It's really, really common. But will that CRM plug into and integrate with other platforms as well so the data can be shared? That's an important question to ask. For Property Council, they did that homework. And the difference for them is they were able to move in about 12 months from fully face-to-face to a whole variety of regional and capital-based audiences that they couldn't access before. If everything was face-to-face, you had to be that destination Chadstone kind of learning academy that you had to come to. You had to drive to them. The massive change for Property Council was they've gone from a fairly small number of face-to-face courses to, I think it's 50 or 60 products now. And it has invigorated their revenue streams. It's really invigorated the membership base, and the tailoring of those experiences now to the members' needs has been a turning point in the way in which the board is thinking about their future. I'll just stop there for a minute and just share a few thoughts around the clients that we work with in different areas. So just to get a sense of who and what D2L is, the best way to do that is kind of get an understanding of who we work with. So we work with, large government departments, universities, not-for-profits, profit-for-purpose businesses as well, entities. And then, of course, lots of various associations, so AICD, Epworth, of course, we work with hospitals, but we work with folks like IAAP2, Massage and Myotherapy, and of course, chartered accountants. So from large to small, many of the questions they ask are very similar in terms of data, member experience. The way in which each of those is reflected in the specific and unique needs of those associations is something that we take a lot of pride in, the way that we respond back to those. So if you've got any questions, you've got some questions around what might be, or you want to connect with any of these associations, you're looking for some information, don't hesitate to contact us. I just want to share some best practice opportunities that you might be interested in. We do a lot of work on social, a lot of media work. So two of those use cases that I talked about have actually been picked up by IT Brief and Channel Life. Two great stories there, but we do a lot of work with our partners in the social space where we actually help them raise their own flags as well. So it's important for us that where clients are engaged in best practice or they're doing some really good work, and it's important for them in terms of their brand recognition, we'll partner with them around that in terms of webinars, helping them with PR pieces, whatever. So we try to ensure that it's not just a relationship based on an LMS piece. We're interested in how their broader aspirations are being met as well. To that point, we have quarterly webinars. The next one's on emerging technologies. There'll be a link to that, and I think that link actually might be on the Ancestral Association's website when it's ready to turn on. Certainly, the next tour that we're running, tech tour, on AI and automation, that's set for next week, for next Wednesday. That link is on the member directory. If you have time and you want to meet firsthand with some tech leaders globally, you want to meet leaders from some of these associations and some of our other key clients, we're having a bit of a D2L fest. We call it Connection, down at Geelong, August 27 to 28. If you have any interest to come down, let us know and we will make a seat available for you. Seats are filling rapidly, but there'll be split streams for education, for associations. We'll have best practice practitioners talking about and sharing expertise in terms of what they're doing. Some of those associations we just spoke about there, we're looking to have those running some sessions as well. But lots of information around how to use those affordances of technology to improve association sustainability, bring some innovation to what you're doing, and really cement and improve that member experience looked at through the lens of education. The last thing, we have ANZ sharing the sessions, and we had one here in Melbourne early in the year. We had one in Wellington as well, but over the balance of October, after we've got those other big face-to-face online pieces done, we're going to be running some sessions in Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane. So we'll let you all know if you do want to connect with us. We can share that information with you, but we bring in those best practice practitioners, we do design studios with them, and we invite folks who just want to come along and have a look at and chat with those leaders from those associations, just to dip their toe in the pool, see what others are doing and see what they can learn from those best practice practitioners. So I think at this point, I will just call out the ebook, Measuring ROI for Associations. It's a resource we put out earlier in the year. It was a useful tool for a number of associations that we were working with earlier in the year. and it helped them set themselves up for their projects that we've started onboarding them with. I've got a couple of other slides there, but I think at this point I might just stop and see if there's any questions.
Hey, Tony, I just want to jump on. We have had a really good question in the chat box. So Serena is from a smaller size organization, a fantastic organization. She's got some amazing leadership going on, and she wants to do a lot around the education stream. Her question specifically is, what do we do with organizations who are on the smaller side? What are your practical tips or suggestions that she can tap into?
So in terms of how you would structure a technology around supporting them, or these organisations are pretty big, how do we just very small, not-for-profits with big education? Bugger all budget. So I can speak directly to two associations which have very modest needs, and we're talking under 500 learners, 500 members. And we have a couple of different programs where we've been able to successfully implement with them, where they can start with a more modest proof of concept for 12 months to test, to build, to iterate, to engage with learners. And then after that, they move into a contracting cycle, which is just tuned to what their budget is. That's a pretty easy way for us to give smaller associations all of the tools and the capacities they need to match their aspirations, but grow over time. Does that help? Does that help, Serena?
I think it's a question a couple of them have had. Yes, it does.
Yeah.
But Tony, this book alone that you've got up on the screen, this is a fantastic book for a lot of these associations sitting at that level to actually jump into and read. There's a lot of measurable actions you can take away from this that you can also implement.
Absolutely. I made an offer this morning, and again, it's just something that we're happy to do. But that association I was speaking about was going through a process of looking at 3 or 4 different CRMs. Now, they're quite a small association, only 3 people internally, and they have experience in the LMS space, but they don't have the experience in that data space. And how they tease through the feedback that they're getting from these CRM vendors. So if you don't have access to someone like Elena, in lieu of that, for this particular association, I said, look, if you can let us know what your shortlist looks like, we can provide you some information back on, just as an arm's length unbiased assessment. This one has open standards, they plug into these sorts of LMSs, 3 or 4 different LMSs. Ours might be one of them, ours might not be. This particular vendor has a very closed box approach. However, for you, that might be perfect because the cost is going to be X. So we're happy to provide that kind of feedback as well, just so that as your plan and your aspirations grow, you can at least start asking some of the deeper questions that might be useful to you. Georgie, Serena, does that help?
And I know Beth just put a really handy link into the chat too as well. So there's some great resources in there. I think Georgie was jumping in saying that budget was an issue for you too. Was that correct, Georgie, or did we miss your question?
Might have missed it.
This is the beautiful thing about live webinars. Get in, ask your questions, because we are going to be wrapping up in a few minutes. And if anybody wants to grab the mic and jump on and have a direct conversation, put your hand up and we will definitely hand that over to you. Okay. All right. No, Georgie's happy with that. So, Tony, I know we're at the end of our time. So all of those fantastic resources, I'm going to share that out with everybody so that they've got access to that. But I also dropped in a live link to your upcoming demo to walk through the Bright Space. It is such a user-friendly system, and I think that's the beauty of it, is that the simpler it is, the more inclined we are to want to get involved with it. But it also talks to the AI and the automation, which we know right now are the key things to keeping our workflows even and connected.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. I hope everybody's having a great day. It was -2 when I left the house this morning, according to the car. So it was coolish.
I don't envy you. And I was complaining when it was like about a 12 or 13 degrees when I left home this morning.
It was a tad icy. But I hope everybody has a great weekend. I know it's we're not quite there yet, but please take care. Have a great weekend. Hope the sun shines for you. And Angela, thank you to yourself and Emily and the whole team.
Oh, pleasure. Always a pleasure to have you on, Tony. To everyone, have an amazing day. We will share these resources with you soon. Well, take care. Bye.
Bye. See you.